The train slowed as it approached the small station of Avonlea, steam curling in pale ribbons against the pale autumn sky. Amelia Rowe pressed her gloved hands together, staring through the window at the familiar fields that stretched far beyond the tracks. Years had passed since she last walked these lanes, yet the air still carried the same crisp scent of river reeds and wood smoke. She had left Avonlea with ambition burning in her heart, chasing a career in London. The city had been everything she dreamed of, bright, alive, merciless. But now she was back, her suitcase resting beside her, carrying not only clothes but also the weight of choices she had never stopped questioning. As the carriage door opened, Amelia stepped down onto the platform. The station was small, its wooden beams weathered, its lamps glowing faintly in the dusk. A few familiar faces lingered, offering polite nods. Yet her eyes searched instinctively for one face alone, Edward Blackthorne. She told herself she did not expect to see him, not after so many years, and yet her heart betrayed her with a quickened rhythm. The village seemed unchanged. Cobbled streets, cottages draped with ivy, and the old church tower rising like a sentinel above the rooftops. She passed the bakery, where the scent of warm bread reminded her of childhood mornings, and then the willow trees near the river, their branches swaying as if whispering secrets. There, beneath those willows, she and Edward had once carved their initials into the bark, swearing promises that felt eternal at 16. But promises, Amelia knew, could be fragile. That evening, as she reached the edge of the Rowe cottage, she paused. A carriage rolled past, its lamps casting golden light across the road. Inside sat Edward. His posture was straighter, his jaw firmer, his attire that of a man no longer belonging to simple village days. Beside him was a woman, elegant, poised, her gloved hand resting lightly on his arm. Amelia's breath caught. She had returned home, but Edward was no longer the boy she once knew. He belonged to someone else now. And yet, as the carriage passed, Edward's eyes lifted and found hers in the shadows. For a heartbeat, time stilled. There was recognition, something unspoken, fierce, and unyielding. Then the wheels carried him away into the night, leaving Amelia standing in silence, her heart trembling with questions that no words could answer. Morning broke with a pale mist drifting across the river. Amelia walked the familiar path along the banks, her boots brushing against damp grass. She had hardly slept, her mind restless with the vision of Edward seated beside another woman. The image returned again and again, as if it had been carved into her thoughts like their initials once carved into the willow's bark. The willow trees stood ahead, their branches bending low, touching the river as though listening to secrets only the water could keep. Amelia slowed her pace. The carvings were still there, faint but not erased by time, bound by a clumsy heart etched with youthful certainty. She ran her fingertips across the grooves, a bittersweet smile forming despite the ache in her chest. Amelia. Her name was spoken softly, carried by a voice she knew too well. She turned, and there he was. Edward stood beneath the canopy of willow branches, the morning light falling across his face. His presence was both familiar and unfamiliar, like a song remembered yet changed in its melody. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Edward stepped closer, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that unsettled her. "You came back," he said quietly. "After all these years." "I had to," she replied, her voice steady though her heart raced. "My father's health is failing. I could not stay away any longer." Edward nodded, but his expression carried something unspoken, something heavy. Amelia dared not ask about the woman she had seen in the carriage, yet the silence between them seemed to demand it. Finally, she whispered, "She is your fiancée, then?" Edward's jaw tightened. "Lady Catherine Ashford. My family owes much to her father. The engagement was necessary." The word stung like a blade. Necessary. Amelia's chest ached, but she masked her pain with composure. "Then I should offer my congratulations," she said, though her voice betrayed a faint tremor. Edward's hand brushed against the carved initials on the tree, his eyes lingering on them. "Do you remember what we promised here, Amelia?" His tone was low, almost desperate. Her breath faltered. She remembered all too well. They had promised forever beneath these trees. And though time had changed everything, standing here now, it felt as if that promise still breathed between them. But before she could answer, a distant church bell rang, pulling Edward back. He stepped away, his face shadowed. "I must go," he murmured. "There are expectations." Then he was gone, leaving Amelia beneath the willow, the air heavy with words unsaid and a heart torn between past and present. The following afternoon, Amelia walked through the village square where the market bustled with chatter and clattering of carts. Yet her thoughts lingered only on Edward's words beneath the willow. The promise. The necessity. Each syllable haunted her, pulling her heart in two directions at once. As she passed the churchyard, a black carriage halted near the entrance. From it stepped a woman draped in velvet, her movements graceful, her expression composed with the ease of someone accustomed to being observed. Lady Catherine Ashford. Amelia recognized her instantly, the woman she had seen beside Edward. Their eyes met, and in that brief exchange Amelia felt the weight of an unspoken rivalry. Lady Catherine approached with a polite smile, yet her gaze held a sharpness that words could not conceal. "You must be Miss Rowe," she said, her voice smooth and measured. "Edward spoke of you." "The childhood friend." Amelia inclined her head, forcing a cordial tone. "Yes. I have only just returned to Avonlea." Lady Catherine studied her a moment longer, then lowered her voice ever so slightly. "It is a beautiful village, though one can grow restless here. Edward deserves more than the quiet of country life. And I intend to give him that." The remark struck Amelia like a blade, though she masked her reaction. She simply smiled, offering no challenge, though every fiber within her wished to. Lady Catherine's carriage soon rolled away, leaving Amelia with a storm brewing in her chest. That evening, she wandered towards Blackthorn Manor, compelled by something she could not name. The grand estate loomed against the twilight, its windows aglow with lamplight. Laughter drifted from within, aristocratic voices, the sound of music, the clink of glasses. Edward was entertaining guests, perhaps alongside his fiancée. Amelia turned to leave, yet a movement in the shadows caught her eye. A man stood half-hidden near the iron gates, his coat dark, his stance alert. He did not look like a guest. His gaze fixed on the manor with an intensity that unsettled her. Before she could speak, the man's eyes met hers. There was a flash of recognition, or was it warning? Then, as quickly as he appeared, he melted back into the trees, swallowed by the night. Amelia's breath quickened. The manor, Edward, Lady Catherine, and now this stranger, something stirred beneath the surface of Avonlea. And Amelia feared it was only the beginning. The following day brought a chill wind that rattled the shutters of the Rowe cottage. Amelia tried to focus on her father's needs, reading to him by the fire, but her mind drifted endlessly back to the manor and the stranger who had vanished into the trees. Late in the afternoon, a messenger arrived with a note written in a hand she knew instantly. Edward's. The words were brief: "Meet me at the library this evening. There is something you must know." Her heart pounded as she made her way to Blackthorn Manor under the cloak of twilight. The gates stood open, lanterns flickering against the stone walls. Servants moved quietly about, but no one stopped her as she entered the great hall and followed the familiar path towards the library. The library doors were half open. She slipped inside, her footsteps hushed on the thick carpet. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, filled with generations of Blackthorn history. The fire burned low in the hearth, shadows curling across the room. Edward stood near the window, his figure outlined against the fading light. He turned as she entered, his face marked with conflict. "Amelia," he said quietly. "I should not have sent for you, but there are things I can no longer keep hidden. Before she could answer, the door creaked again. Lady Catherine stepped inside, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. "So," she said evenly, "this is how it is." Edward stiffened, but Catherine's gaze never wavered from Amelia. She moved closer, her voice low and deliberate. "You should know, Miss Rowe, there are forces at play here far beyond childhood promises. Blackthorn Manor carries obligations, ones Edward cannot escape." Amelia opened her mouth to reply, but in that moment a sound cut through the room. A thud, heavy and abrupt, echoing from the corridor beyond. All three froze. Edward crossed swiftly to the door, but before he could reach it, the library lights flickered. A draft swept through the chamber, and from the far side of the shelves came a whisper, soft, urgent, impossible. Amelia's skin prickled. She knew she had heard it before. The same voice that had called her name beneath the willows. The whisper faded into silence, leaving the three of them staring at one another in the dim library. Edward's hand tightened on the door handle, while Lady Catherine's lips curved into a thin, knowing smile, as if she had expected this very moment. Amelia's breath trembled. "You heard it too," she whispered. Edward nodded once, his jaw set. "It came from the east corridor. Stay here." But Amelia stepped forward. "No. If there are truths you've kept from me, Edward, then I will hear them tonight." Catherine laughed softly, though there was no warmth in it. "Foolish girl. The manor has a way of choosing who hears its secrets. Are you certain you wish to be one of them?" Ignoring her, Amelia followed Edward into the shadowed passage beyond the library. The air grew colder the further they walked, the sconces on the wall flickering as though uneasy. Their footsteps echoed across the stone, but beneath the sound, Amelia swore she heard it again, a whisper, faint, drawing them onwards. At the end of the corridor stood a heavy oak door, older than the rest of the manor. Edward paused before it, his face pale. "This is what I meant to tell you. Behind this door lies the truth of Blackthorn Manor, and the curse that binds it." He pushed the door open. A narrow stairway spiraled down into darkness, the scent of damp stone rising to meet them. Amelia's heart pounded as they descended, her fingers grazing the wall for balance. At the bottom, a small chamber opened before them. Dust lay thick across the floor, but in the center stood a pedestal upon which rested an ancient leather-bound book. Its cover was marked with a crest, a blackthorn branch entwined with a serpent. Edward's voice was low. "For generations, my family has been tied to this. It is said the first blackthorn bargained with something that should never have been summoned. And now, every heir is bound to that pact." Amelia reached out, her fingertips brushing the cover. The air stirred, the candle Edward carried shuddering. From the walls, the whisper rose again, clearer now, urgent, as though speaking directly to her. Her blood ran cold. It was her name. Amelia. The voice called from the shadows. The chamber seemed to breathe, the air alive with unseen presence. Amelia's name echoed again, carried on a whisper that stirred the dust from the stones. She froze, her hand still resting on the book. Edward stepped closer, his face tight with fear. "Do not answer it," he whispered urgently. "That is how it begins." But Amelia could not move. The whisper was not cold or cruel, it was pleading. A voice filled with sorrow rather than menace. "Help me," it said, though only she seemed to hear those words. Lady Catherine appeared in the doorway, her shadow falling across the stair. "You should have stayed in the library," she said sharply. Yet even she faltered when the air shifted, the sound brushing past her ear. Her eyes widened, though she quickly masked it. Amelia drew a breath. "Who are you?" she whispered. The chamber trembled. The candlelight flared, casting wild shapes upon the walls. The book beneath her hand pulsed faintly, as though something within it stirred. Edward grabbed her wrist. "Enough, Amelia. This book is the chain that binds my family. It holds the pact, the curse, everything. To open it is to invite what waits beyond. But before he could pull her away, the cover of the book creaked on its own. The crest of the blackthorn and serpent glowed faintly, and a single page fluttered open as though by unseen hands. On the parchment was a name. Margaret Whitcomb. Amelia's heart stopped. The name was familiar, carved long ago into the willow tree where she and Edward once made their promise. Edward's grip tightened. It is impossible. She vanished more than 30 years ago. No one has spoken her name in this house since. The whisper came again, stronger now, filling every corner of the chamber. Find me, free me. The flame of the candle guttered, and for a moment, Amelia thought she saw her, a pale figure in the corner of the room, watching with eyes that seemed both desperate and knowing. And then, the figure was gone. The chamber remained heavy with silence after the vision faded. Edward lowered the candle, his face pale, while Catherine's composure faltered for the first time. Amelia stepped back from the pedestal, her heart still pounding. Margaret Whitcomb, she murmured. Why would her name be written here? Edward's voice was low, almost reluctant. She was a distant cousin. Some said she was meant to inherit, but she disappeared one winter's night without a trace. My grandfather forbade her name to be spoken in this house again. Lady Catherine's eyes flickered sharply. And now her spirit lingers. Is that what you would have Amelia believe? Ghost stories told to frighten children. But Amelia shook her head. I saw her. Just now. She wants to be found. Edward stared at the book, his hand hovering as though torn between closing it forever and reading what it might reveal. If she is bound to this place, then the curse runs deeper than I feared. A sudden knock echoed from above, faint but insistent. The three of them froze. Another knock followed, this time closer, as though footsteps had begun moving across the floor of the manor. Catherine straightened, her voice taut. We are not alone here. They hurried back up the stairway, the candlelight trembling with each step. The corridor beyond was colder than before, as though someone had passed through only moments earlier. Shadows stretched long across the walls. Amelia's gaze caught on the far end of the passage. There, half hidden in the gloom, lay a trail of damp footprints leading away from the stairwell. Bare feet, glistening against the stone. Her breath caught. The footprints led not back toward the library, but deeper into the manor, towards the west wing, the one that had been sealed for years. Edward's voice broke the silence. No one has walked that wing since the day Margaret vanished. The candle sputtered, and for a heartbeat Amelia thought she heard it again, the faint echo of a woman's sob, drifting down the corridor. The footprints glistened like silver in the candlelight, leading the three of them into the forbidden west wing. The heavy doors groaned as Edward forced them open, the hinges shrieking after years of disuse. A rush of cold air spilled out, carrying with it the scent of damp stone and something older, something forgotten. The corridor beyond was lined with shrouded furniture and portraits cloaked in dust. Their faces were hidden beneath the years, but Amelia felt their eyes following as she passed. Lady Catherine clutched her cloak tighter, her voice sharp. This wing was sealed for a reason. If you have any sense, you'll turn back now. But Amelia pressed on, her eyes fixed on the footprints that wound deeper into the wing. She's guiding us. They followed the trail to a grand chamber at the very end. The door stood slightly ajar, though no light spilled from within. Edward pushed it open, and the candle flame wavered as though reluctant to enter. Inside, the room was vast but desolate. A bed draped in molded silk stood against one wall, and tall windows overlooked the grounds, their panes fogged with years of neglect. Yet it was not the decay that drew their eyes, but the mirror. An enormous gilt-framed mirror leaned against the far wall, its surface cloudy with age. Across the glass ran a jagged crack, splitting the reflection into two uneven halves. And there, faint but visible, was the outline of a woman. She stood within the mirror, her pale hand pressed to the glass, her lips forming words Amelia could almost hear. Margaret, Amelia breathed. Edward staggered back, his voice hoarse. No, it cannot be. Catherine's face had drained of colour. This is madness. That mirror should have been destroyed. Amelia stepped closer. The woman's eyes locked onto hers, pleading, desperate. The whisper rose again, but this time it was not faint. It filled the entire chamber, shaking the very walls. Free me, before it is too late. The mirror shuddered violently, the crack widening. And in that instant, Amelia realized the truth. Margaret Whitcomb was not lost to time. She was trapped.